Can you explain why we're going to get excited about Septic?
Yeah, I know, right? You never thought you'd be talking about this and being excited. So this is just such a cool program that Jim Marshall, who's our director of construction, really spearheaded leading into this year. Spent a lot of time on the tail end of 2020 putting this together. And the way that it works is basically we took the relationship we have with our septic vendor, who is a trusted vendor. We've worked with him for many years. And we said, how can we capitalize on this relationship to make it mutually beneficial, really to allow him to thrive and perform better for us, as well as allow us to perform, of course, better for our clients when it comes to maintenance expenses that you would be seeing on a monthly basis, annual basis. And so basically what happened is we said, okay, we have about 9% of our portfolio of homes that we manage that are on septic systems. So it's not a huge majority, but certainly enough to pack a big punch when you're talking about maintenance expense. And when you look at overall expenses historically, it's about 9% of that overall maintenance expense as we've tracked it by trade over time. And so, you know, when we look at that, that's a pretty big number, the dollar amount. When you really look at dollars and cents and the impact to the client, it's really significant. And so we were trying to think of ways to make this experience better for the resident, the cost lower for the client, and the experience for the vendor a little bit more positive as well. So we came up with a program where basically a home that is on septic gets enrolled in this program by the vendor doing inspection to make sure that the system is working properly and that our vendor feels comfortable backing it, kind of like a warranty service. And then in order for this to make sense for him, obviously he's got to get paid. He can't do work for free. And so what we're doing is we are layering in an additional expense to the resident on the front end of their lease agreement, to where they will be charged just like they would for sewer or water with the city, right? Just like I pay my JEA bill and I have a city water and sewer bill. If you're on septic, traditionally you don't have that sewer portion of that bill. And so typically you're just saving on that utility expense. We're just lumping in a utility expense to that resident when they're signing their lease in order to properly maintain that system and keep it working for them as well while they're living and renting it in that home. And so what that does is the resident is paying that cost gets passed to the vendor as basically the vendor's profit center, right? And then they handle all repairs using those funds that we're collecting for them. And so what does that do? It means that there isn't a septic bill coming through for a $650 repair to you, to the client. That means if we have to replace a septic system, it largely covers most ways and reasons that something would need to be replaced. And so instead of passing along those large expenses to the client, the vendor is absorbing them, utilizing these funds that have been paid over time by the resident. So it's kind of like an insurance policy, a warranty policy of sorts is probably the best way to explain it, but it really protects the client. Is the main reason we're doing this is we're trying to limit or reduce septic expenses that you would see on your property. So it's super innovative. Obviously, this is a new program. We've just rolled it out. We have about 20 homes eligible for it today. We're only rolling it out when the home is hitting the rental market. So where your home might be occupied with a lease in place, we aren't going to that resident at this point in time and saying, hey, I know you haven't ever had to pay this additional fee before, but now you have to. We're waiting until the property turns and we have it back on the market so that it's kind of a fresh start for everyone. Felt like that really was the best way to make that something that a resident could really believe in and see as a positive, while obviously still trying to focus on the decrease of the expense. And so as it works, and as we see this really come full circle and we see those expenses reduce, we'll continue to roll it out to more and more homes with the intention to be able to roll it out across all homes on septic and really see that impact to you as the client in the future with those expenses. So it's really interesting, super innovative. I didn't think of it. I just get to share with you today, but it's really impressive.
That's kind of like my entire role in this business. I didn't think of it, but I get to share it with you today. But this one, it really, I think is gonna is going to move the needle, especially more in future years. So let's kind of take a few steps back, right? If we know that the backdrop here is that inventory is extremely scarce today, and that it's only getting harder and harder for turnkey rental property companies to be able to provide inventory. If we start looking at the biggest ticket items for maintenance costs and start to come up with innovative solutions, we in theory can drop those maintenance expenses. And if we in theory can do that, what that allows us to do is to have more opportunities to create inventory. Because right now, the way it works, our septic costs on our property evaluations for you as an owner of rental properties, we expect you to have more maintenance costs because you're on septic. You have a septic system than if you were on a city sewer. And so if you back all that back down the line, JWB has to acquire the property for much lower to be able to sell it to you and produce positive cash flow. So if we can attack these big ticket items like Mellisa is talking about, ultimately this allows us one way that we can extend the runway, which is one huge win. And then, right? I mean, Mellisa, what does it typically cost to repair a septic system? Maybe $7,000, maybe $10,000.
If you're looking at replacement, yes, you're in the high thousands. You're looking at 7, 10. I've seen some for up to $12,000. It's all dependent, obviously, on the size of the yard and things like that. The lowest cost is in the 300s, 400s. So it's not cheap to maintain, and being able to really mitigate those costs and keep them from hitting a client at the end of the day is going to be a huge way that we impact, like what you're saying, the ability to have a purchase for our client makes sense, to where the returns make sense, and we're able to still perform in a positive way, even with the changes you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, there's a huge win for clients long term. I mean, I'm going to go through the multiple wins across here, right? This is going to allow JWB to pay more for a property on septic, which gives us a better chance to be able to create that inventory and provide it for clients in the future. This is one of dozens of ways that we are coming up with solutions to that problem. And then if you're talking about the biggest part of that septic expense, I mean, I would assume if you have maybe a $7,000 to $10,000 expense if septic tanks go out of those expenses, if you can mitigate that, right? If you can decrease the chances of an owner feeling that has the biggest opportunity to move the needle and potentially decreasing septic costs, right?
Absolutely. You know, if we took a bucket of expense like handyman work, where those costs are so small, they add up certainly, but on a large scale, to actually move the needle in a significant way, you have to look at some of these high ticket items that really hurt when they happen. They hit that bottom line hard, and they can wipe you out for much more than just a couple months of return or cash flow, right? They're significant when they happen. So if you can prevent them from happening, you'll see that play out.
Yeah. And then just the final thing, when you and Adam and the team rolled this out to us, I was looking at this and I'm like, man, if I'm an owner, because I am an owner of rental properties, this sounds great. This is kind of like insurance, and it prevents me from having that, big cash hit, that's worth it to me to pay for that. That's actually what I was thinking as you guys are rolling this out. And, the other thing I love about it is now the goals are aligned between the septic provider and JWB and the resident, right? Because the septic provider has an incentive to make sure that the system is performing. So I loved all these things. But then you guys shared that this is also a win for the resident, right? And this is an expense that is going to go on the resident, but it's nothing different than what they would be paying if they had been attached to city sewer, right? And I never really put those pieces of the puzzle together, how this could still fit in line with what a normal expense situation would be for a resident, but this is not an expense to owners as we start to roll this out more and more. I just think that really is a home run across the board.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing vertical integration with the septic provider is what I'm hearing, Greg.
You know it, brother.
Yeah. And a lot of this is a hit. This is a hit in the chat, right? Stevie B says he loves that. It's so logical. Robert Persuina says, excellent innovation, guys.